Hi everyone, welcome back in another exciting project where we're going to be building this awesome project. We're going to be using Tanstack React table to be able to create this awesome table. And of course, we're going to be using React, TypeScript, and shadcn UI to be able to use all the components provided by the library to create faster this project. So I'm going to start from this drop down so you can be able to change from light to dark mode. So we're going to use shadcn for this to make it more easier to integrate into the project. So I'm going to start by the first feature, which is the search, as you can see. So we're having a working search. So for simultaneously for the table, but also for the view card or the card view, sorry. And talking about the card view, so this component is completely different than the component that we're using for the table. So whatever that we are doing into the Tanstack React table, all the features, we're going to sync it with the card view component, which is the most challenging thing that I encountered building this project. And as you can see, everything is working well. So the next thing that I'm going to show you is the sorting. So as you can see, when I sort things, so if I sort by diagnosis and I go to the and I choose the card view, as you can see, we're going to have uh, which uh, which element that I'm sorting by, just to let the user know that we are doing the sorting. And when I click on the reset and go back to uh, the table, so the sorting is gone. And notice here, if I, for example, I sort by the first name, so if you remember the sorting position, and if I go to the card view, as you can see, we're going to have the same sorting position. So all the functions that we're using in the Tanstack, which are built-in functions, so we're going to build them manually into the card view component. And to be able to link between the two elements, so we're going to use Zustand as a state management, so we can be able to get to create some states that we're using to be when we are sorting elements into this task stack and use them into this card view, which is a separate component, and create functions manually to be able to do the sorting, the filtering. So let me delete the sorting, and now I'm going to show you we can be able to filter by male or female. So if I filter by male, so we're going to have all the patients that are female. And if I narrow things down, I can be able to filter by diagnosis. So if I click on heart disease, so I'm going to have only the patient who has heart disease, and she is a female. So notice here we're having this to be able to show the user which elements that are filtered by, and I can click on the reset button to be able to eliminate and get rid from the filters. And if I open up again the drop down, so all the elements are unchecked. So we're gonna be building this, of course. And also another element that I want to show you is if I select the elements or the patients, so we're going to have how many patients has been selected, but also we can be able to delete them all if I want to, and also if I can to select and select them. And if I go back to the card view, as you can see, I'm gonna have the elements that are selected. So also what we're gonna do, and the challenge here, so we need to know the indexes of the patients inside the React Task table and to know them in the card view. So that's also has been a challenge for me to be able to know to sync the selected elements from the table and the selected elements inside the React, inside the card view component. And if I click on delete all, as you can see, all the element has been deleted. And also if I go back to the table, so because I clicked on delete all, so the thing that we're having in here gone. And also at the bottom of the table, we can be able to set how many rows that we want to see per page. And also we can be able to go from one page to another. So, and also we can be able to remove by patient by having this drop down. So when I click on remove, so the actual patient has been removed. And finally, I'm going to show you the dialog to be able to add a new patient. So when I click on, and also I want to show you that we are going to use React hook form to be able to track the elements. So when on the add patient, so we're going to have the errors. And so when I add randomly like this into these inputs and I click on add patient, as you can see, if I sort by appointed date to be able to see uh, the new patient that has been added. So we're gonna find it into our list. And also we can be able to edit the patient if I want to. So let me modify all the elements in the dialog. So I'm gonna do this for the second name and click update. So as you can see, the element has been updated successfully. So, and everything that I'm doing, it's going to update all the cards since we're using React, of course. So this is the project that we're gonna be building. And we're going to learn a ton of things from building this project. So if you are interested about building this project, stick with me till the end of this video. Hi everyone, welcome back. So as you can see, I already created the project. So I'm in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to show you very quickly the steps to be able to set that up, to set this up, because I know many of you know how to be able to create uh, the project. So the first thing that I'm going to start with is the framework that we're going to be using is Next.js. So the before you use Next.js, make sure to install Node.js into your system because Next.js use Node.js as a backend to be able to run the backend part of the framework. So this is mandatory before you start using Next.js. So after installing this, the next step, so you are going to copy this command line and go back to your VS Code editor and you can create a new terminal and paste your command line here and hit enter. So you will have all of these questions, just stick with the default options. And after that, it's going to take a while to install all the dependencies needed to run the project. So after installing successfully all the project or all dependencies, sorry, so the next thing that I did because I had some issues with installing dependencies because of the latest version of React, which is 19. So what I did to be able to avoid this is to install the or downgrade the React version to 18. So instead of using 19, I just changed the 18 version. And also, so the same, make sure to do it for the types, but also for the actual package, React package, which is React and React DOM. So after this, what I did, I installed shadcn. So what you are going to do, go to the introduction after going to the shadcn website or go to the docs first. So let me click again on the docs and we're going to go to the installation part and go to the next.js since we're using next.js as a framework. And what I did, I just copy this to be able to install the default options, which is these ones, and just copy this and paste it in a terminal. So you will see some files added into your project like components.json and also the libs folder. And also you will see this root uh, layer-based code into the global.css has been added successfully. So after creating this or installing shadcn, what we're going to do, we are going to add the poppins font. So I'm running the application and I'm just rendering this phrase. This is a home page just to see if the Poppins font has been successfully applied. So if we go to the page.tsx, make sure, of course, to get rid from the boilerplate code that is given once you install the framework. So I'm just rendering this simple text. And as you can see, I'm adding this poppins utility class, which is a custom utility class that I created inside the global.css. But before this, we need to add something inside the layout.jsx. What we need to do, we need to add the poppins object from this package, and then we're going to create an instance of the poppins object and store all of these objects inside this poppins variable. And then we are going to take the variable subset or property from the poppins variable and add it into the class name. So after this, as I showed you, make sure to add this. So this is what we're going to use inside the GSX to be able to apply the font as I showed you in here in the class name of this div. So after doing this, so we're going to install uh, Zustand. So we're going to use Zustand as state management. So it's pretty lightweight and easy to use without using a lot of boilerplate code as opposed to the context API from React. So you need to add a lot of boilerplate code to be able to create your context API. So that's why I decided lately to choose the Zustand for all the recent projects. So it's very simple to be able to install Zustand. Just type in npm install Zustand and hit enter. So I've already installed Zustand, so I'm going to just do it again just to show you the actual terminal command. So as you can see, it's going to take a while to be able to install the actual package depending on your internet connection. And also make sure to install React icons library. So I like to use this library. So you can stick with the Lucid React if you want to, but I think that React icons it's a lot richer than the Lucid React library. So hit enter after adding this because my connection speed is pretty slow, so it's gonna take a while. So I don't want to overwhelm you with this. So this is the actual step, first step to be able to to set things up for our project that we're going to be building. So the next thing that we are going to be adding is the dark mode. So we're going to use the dark mode from shadcn since we're using shadcn just to be able to save time. And as you can see, when I click on this, we're going to have this drop down. And when I click on dark, so everything's going to turn to dark automatically. So the first thing that we're going to do, make sure to uh, access to the dark mode section. So we're going to use next.js. And the first thing that you should do, you should install this package. Just copy this and open up your terminal and paste it in here and hit enter. So after installing the package, the next thing we need to create a theme provider. So pretty simple. We are gonna create this theme provider.tsx and we're gonna copy this and paste it in here. And the next step that we're gonna do, we're gonna take this theme provider and we're gonna wrap it inside the layout.tsx inside the children. And this is coming from the third step, as you can see. So we're going to add the theme provider component inside the body tag and also make sure to add the express hydration warning. So after doing this, we are going to go to the fourth step, which is copying this and creating a component or a file called the toggle mode.tsx. So let me close this terminal and paste the code that you copied from the website, paste it in here. So the only thing that I added inside the class name, which is the poppins, so you can have the poppins font applied for our drop down as you can see. So after doing this, what I did just to show you that the dark mode is working. So I just call the component, which is the toggle mode inside the toggle mode.jsx, which is, so this is the name of the component, and we called it in here in the home page just to see that everything is working fine or not. So this is how we are going to set, or how we set the dark mode. So it's pretty straightforward and it's pretty simple. So the next step that we're gonna do is add in the navbar for the application. And next we created the navbar. So this is the navbar. So we're having the logo, the name of the application, the search bar, and as you can see, when I type in stuff in the input, we're having the icon to be able to delete the input from here, and we're having the drop down that I showed you to change to the dark mode if you want to, and we're having the button to be able to add the new patient. So let's go back to the VS Code. So I'm going to show you what I did to be able to create all of this. So first I created this folder called the components folder. So we're having the navbar.tsx and the search input.tsx. And also another thing that I did, I created another folder called hooks. And here we're going to use Zustand to be able to manage the states. And I started with the query. So here, when I start typing stuff, actually this is going to be saved inside the query. So I'm going to talk about this very quickly and what it is. So here, the first thing that to do to be able to create a new store, we are going to use the create element from the Zustand package, and here, so we are going to add this function that's going to have the set parameter. And here we're going to define the interface or the structure of this whole element or this whole function that we created by using the create method from Zustand. So the interface is going to be pretty simple. The query is going to be a string type, and the set query it's going to be this structure. So it's going to be of type void, meaning that's going to be a function accepting the parameter, which is going to be of type string. And here we're going to define the actual uh, default values of each element that we created inside the interface. So the query is going to be empty by default, and this is how we're going to create the set query. So I'm going to show you inside the search input how this is going to function. So first, let's go to the navbar.jsx, and here this is the JSX to be able to render our navbar. So we're going to start by this theme. So we're going to use the use theme hook from the package that we installed to be able to actually apply the dark mode theme. So they're having this hook, and we're gonna destruct the use theme to be able to access to the theme constant. Here we are creating the background variable state depending on the state of the theme. So if it is dark, we are going to save these utility classes and the background color. Otherwise, we're going to use the background as white. And here in the return GSX. So this is the printf with these all the utility classes. So we are setting the height as 94 pixel. So the position is going to be relative, the width is going to be full. And here we're going to use whatever returned inside the background color state in here. So when the theme is dark, we're going to use all of this. So just to show you, like when I turn the dark mode on, as you can see, we're going to have a different color, and because we did this turn operator. So we're going to use the background as gray and the border. So we're going to add the border at the bottom uh, as we have in here, and otherwise we're going to just use the background white. So this is for the header. The header we're having the icon, so we're using this icon from React Icons package, and also we're setting some actual utility classes. The text is going to be white, and also we're making the text bigger or the length bigger of the text by using the text EXL utility classes. So this is for the name. We're using the h1 tag, and this is for the search input. So the search input, it is inside the search input.jsx. So if we go to the search input, so this is the actual JSX that is handling the logic that we created in here. So when type in stuff, so let me uh, open up the console log and I'm gonna log this out. So let me log out, create a logout here just to show you like when I'm typing things, as you can see. So we are logging out the query since the query, so the query is used from the use search query store that I showed you, and also we're using the set query. So the reason why I'm doing so, because we're going to use this query when we get into the table. So we're going to use the query inside the React table from Tanstack to be able to actually apply the filter. So that's why we used the store to be able, or the state management with the query and the set query with the state management to be able to do so. Since this search is far from the table or the component that we're going to use to be able to create our table. So we're going to delete this console log. So here, as I showed you, we are importing this from this custom hook. We're creating this input ref. So here, this input ref, it's going to allow us to be able to access to the element or to its reference inside the DOM. So this is why we're going to use the use ref of type HTML input element to be able to access to the all properties from this type. And here inside the return JSX, we're using the input from shadcn. So first, make sure to install the inputs component here. So this is the CLI command to be able to add it into your project. All you have to do, open up the terminal and paste your command line and hit enter. And if we go to the lib folder or the components folder, you should have the input.tsx. And also make sure to install the button. Again, go back to the shadcn website, search for the button, copy the CLI command and paste it in here in terminal. So we're having the button and the input. So the button, we already have installed it. Sorry for this. So let's get back into our JSX. So we're having the value. So the value of the input is going to be linked to the query. And whenever we are typing inside the input, the onChange event listener, it's going to be triggered. And we're going to use the set query. And inside the set query, we're going to use the e.target.value to be able to access to the text that we are typing. And we're going to use the set query to be able to update the query as we are typing. The type, it's going to be text, of course, and this is for the placeholder. And this is for the class name to be able to style and add more stylings to our input. And this, it's going to be to actually handle the appearance of this icon whenever I click on it, it's going to actually eliminate or set or reset the query state. So this is the turning operator. So it's pretty simple logic. So we're gonna make sure if the query's length is more than 0. So if it is the case, we're gonna use this icon with the utility classes inside this class name. So when we click on the icon, so as I showed you, to be able to update or empty the query, we're going to use the set query with empty string. and the input ref that current that focus to be able to set back the focus to the input. So if I delete this, for example, or I comment this and hit enter and go back, and if I do this, as you can see, the focus is not going to go back to the input. So this going to help us for this. So that's why we added or we created the input ref to be able to actually set the focus back when the query is empty. And if the actual query is not empty, we're gonna show back the actual search icon. So this is basically how we can be able to create our navbar. And if we go back to the navbar.jsx, we're having this button with the icon and the new patient. So once we get into the dialog part to be able to add the new patient, so this is going to be deleted, and we're going to use the dialog component for shadcn to be able and add it in here. So we're going to get into this uh, next further into our project. So the next thing that we added is these three cards. So this is for the total patients, the most common diagnosis for the second card, and the upcoming appointments for the third card. I want to turn the dark mode on. As you can see, the colors will be updated to fit the dark mode theme as well, but also the same for the background color. So we're using kind of gray, so it's a slate color. So I'm going to show you first how to be able to do this and also sync it with the next themes package that we're using for the dark mode theme. So let's go back to the page.jsx. So as you can see, I added some code in the home functional component. So we're having the statistic cards component that we're using to be able to render the component that I showed you. So here we're gonna call this use theme. So we're gonna use this use theme hook from the next themes package. So we're gonna destruct it and we're gonna use the theme constant. So as we did for the navbar. So depending on the state of the theme, so we're gonna use this journey operator, which is the same thing as the if statement, just for as a shortcut to save some lines. We're going to use this structure, which is called the turn operator. So if it is dark, we're going to use this background. So we're going to save whatever that we're having in here inside the background color or the BG color state or variable. Otherwise, we're going to use this background slate. So we're going to use this inside the class name to make sure that it's gonna be used as a variable inside class name. So that's why we added backticks in here and the curly braces. So also we're adding the relative and the min and the height. It's gonna be min height 100 viewport. So first, I want to show you the statistic card component that we are using in the home functional component. So I'm going to start from here because we're having this function. So this function, it's going to be reused. So this whole function, it's going to be reused inside this, the main function, which is the statistic cards component. So the first thing that we're doing, we're going to create an array that's going to have the objects that we're going to use in for each card. So this is for the first card, this is for the second one, and this is for the third one. So here, what we're going to do inside the GSX, so we're going to use this array and we're going to map through each element and we're going to call or use the single statistic card. We're going to pass inside of it for each element its properties or its elements. So if we go to the single statistic card component, which will accept, of course, three elements as we showed you in here. So these are going to be the properties, except this one is for React, so it's a mandatory thing to add. Uh, so if we go all the way up, as you can see, so this is the actual GSX of each card. So we're going to use the title in here, we're going to use the value in here, and the icon, we're going to use it inside this div. So this just for TypeScript. So we're going to define the structure of the props as this. The title is going to be a string, the value is going to be a union type, either number or string, and the icon is going to be a React node icon. So this is how we created our statistic cards functional component. And finally, we need to add it in here to be able to render it in the home page. And also make sure to use the use client, since using a hook, custom hook here. So this need to be a client, since all the components in next.js are server components by default. So after we created these cards, the next element that I added is this part. So we're having the patient list text, and also we're having the toggle buttons to be able to switch from the grid or the table mode. And also I added this drop down to be able to filter by male or female. And also, as you can see, we're having some numbers that are coming from static data that we're going to use inside our application. So when I click on filter, clear filters, as you can see, these are going to be cleared automatically. But before I start talking about this whole component, I'm going to talk about each part step by step. But the first thing that I'm going to start with is the data, the static data that we're going to be using. So let's start talking about this. As you can see, I added many files, but I'm going to start talking about the data first. So here, as you can see, I have the data folder, and inside of it, we're having the patient's data.js. So here, so this is the structure of the data. So this is the structure of each patient. So we're having the ID, the first name, the last name, diagnosis, the gender, the appointment date, and the last visit. So these are going to be string, and the gender is going to be a union type of um, male or female. So we are going to define the types. Um, for the gender, male or female. The diagnosis, it's going to be of type diagnosis. That's going to have all of these types that we defined ourselves. So you can make sure that when we start working with the patient data and the table and other components, so we can be able to access to the right type with the IntelliSense feature that is provided by VS Code. And at the top, as you can see, we're having this nano ID, which is a library that we're using to be able to generate IDs. So to be able to install it, uh, make sure to type in your terminal, type npm install nano ID and hit enter. So I've already installed this, so I just for the sake of showing you how things going to turn out. So as you can see, uh, the actual package exists and it has been installed in the project. And finally, we're having the array, as you can see. So it's just mock data that we're going to use in for creating the front end of our project. So as you can see, we're going to use the same structure that we use for the patient. So we defined the patient's array with the interface that we created with the brackets, just to tell TypeScript that this is going to be an object of arrays of the structure that we defined up here. So after this, the next thing that I'm going to show you is this custom hook called use patient data store. So after I showed you the data and how we created our static data, so this is the code that we're going to be using to be able to simulate the fetching of the data, but also to store the actual data inside the patients and the set the patient's data, and we're going to be able to update the patient's state by using the set patients uh, state. And also we're having the add patient function to be able to add the function. So here we're using Zustand like we did for the use search query just to be able to access to these states and other components freely across all the application to avoid using prompts. And also we need to create as well the remove patient function, what we are going to do later on in our project. So here, as I showed you inside the use search query store, we're going to use the create instance from Zustand, and we're going to use this function. So here we are going to set the patients as null, since here we define the patients can be the area of patients interface or null. And here uh, we're gonna set the set patients, which is gonna be a function as we did here. So this is the signature of the set patients. So it's going to accept the patient's prop of this type, where either it's gonna be this type or null, and it's gonna be a void, meaning that's gonna be a function that doesn't return anything. And then we're having the fetch patients function, which is an async function because we're going to simulate the fetching of the data from the server, sorry, and we're going to use a promise. So this promise, we define it by using this generic type. So it's going to accept the patients as an array. And here we are going to pass in the resolve method after 690 milliseconds just to simulate the delay waiting for the data to come from the server. So that's why we're using the set timeout. And after that, we're gonna update the patient's state by using the built-in set function or property, sorry, from Zustand to be able to update the patient that we set beforehand as a null when this started. And if it is an error, we're going to just log out this as an error. Then we're having the add patient function. It's going to be also an async function. And also here, what we're going to do, we're going to accept the new patient, which is of type patient. And then we're going to run a new promise. So it's going to be of type void. So we're not going to return anything. And then we're going to use the set timeout. And here we are going to access to the current patients by using the get method from Zustand. And here, if I do this, I can be able to access to the all properties that we created in the interface or the use patient data store interface that we defined for our store. So here what I want is to access to the patients. So if somehow this is null, it's going to be, so it's a fallback, it's going to be an empty array. Then we're gonna update or create a new array by using the spread dots so we can be able to actually access or don't lose all the elements inside the current patients. And then we're going to add the new patient that is coming from the prompt of the function. And then we're going to just return a resolve since that is going to be a void function. And this is going to be delayed for about 40 milliseconds. So if it is an error, we're going to log out the error. So this is basically how we create our data and how we are going to consume our data across all the application by using Zustand, so we can be able to access to the all the elements as we defined in here across all the application as I'm going to show you as we move on into building the application. So after I showed you the data and its structure, so now I'm going to show you how to be able to create these two elements. So the toggle, as you can see when I click on this, so the colors is going to be changing, but also under the hood, this is going to be selected. And also I'm going to show you this drop down. And again, we're going to use shadcn components to be able to create this along with the data that I showed you, so I can be able to show these numbers. So let's go back to the code. And before I showed you the drop down, and the actual how to create the toggle logic. So the next thing that I want to explain is the use gender store and the use patient view. So the use gender store here we are going to actually store the states that we're going to be using to when we select the elements into the drop down. Like if I do this, it's going to be stored inside the selected genders. So the reason why I did so because I want to be accessible from other components, and the component that we're going to be using or where we're going to use these states is the table. So instead of using props, which is going to lead to prop drilling, so we used Zustand as state management so other components can be able to access to these two variables. So I'm going to explain very briefly what this code is. So it's very simple. So as we did for the use patient data store, because we're using Zustand, so we're going to create our store like this, and this is the structure of it. The selected genders is going to be of type of array of strings, and the set selected genders it's going to be this structure accepting the genders as a string of an array returning nothing, meaning that is a simple function. And here we're gonna set the selected genders as an empty array, which is the default value of it. And then we're gonna use the set selected genders like this, the same structure that we created. So the genders, it's going to be taken and update the selected genders. So, and for the use patient view, so pretty much we're going to use the same thing, but here it's going to be uh, slightly different because we are going to use uh, string literal types here, as you can see, for the current view option. So it's going to be either grid or list. So here we're having the current view, which is going to be this type, and the update current view to be able to update this current view. So this is the structure of it. And inside the store, we're going to return the current view, and the default value is going to be list. And inside the update current view, so we're going to take this prompt or this parameter, and we're going to use it to be able to update the current view by using the function set provided by Zustand. So this is the basic code to be able to create a store inside the Zustand. And as I said, so this states can be accessible to any component inside the project. So now let's get into the code that I'm using for this. So here I'm going to go to the page.tsx. So we're having the summary and button area. So this is the code of this whole part. So we're having this part for the total patients. So this is so we're using a span tag. So here we're using the icon toggle and the gender dropdown. And we are putting them inside one div so that they can be like this, because in the parent component, we're using the justify between so that these two items are going to be positioned automatically at the extreme right and left part of the screen. So the icon toggle, it's going to be inside this functional component. So this is the code for this tiny part. So here, what we're gonna do, we're gonna use the current view and the update current view from the store that I showed you. So instead of using them locally, we're gonna use them inside the state management, as I said. So when we are gonna start working with the table, we can be able to easily access to them. So here, so this is the GSX of the toggle group. So we are using the shadcn component. So the thing that I do is I don't create the code from scratch. All I have to do, I go to the shadcn, and after installing the package, so let me turn the light mode on, and I'm going. First, we need to install this. So after typing this, pasting it inside the terminal and installing the component. So what I did, I just went to this code and I pasted it in here and I modified it so it can be able to actually get the outcome that I want in the project. So here we're having the toggle group. So the type is going to be single. The value is going to be linked to the current view state. The on value change is going to be linked to the handle toggle function. And the class name, so just flex and gap. And here we're having the items. They're going to be in the toggle group item tag provided by shadcn. So this is going to have the value list and this is going to have the value grid. So inside of it, we're going to have just icons. So this is for the list icon and this is for the grid icon. We're using the React icons library. So inside the class name, as you can see, we're using this turning operator. So if the current view is list, we're going to use the text primary, which is the default color that we're using from shadcn or from the shadcn global.css, which is this one. And so let's go back to our code. Otherwise, we're going to use the gray color. And the same thing that we're going to do for the grid icon. And the handle toggle is going to actually take whatever that we're having inside the value or the parameter, and we're going to update the current view. And we're doing this just to prevent that this is going to be empty if we click on it twice. So this is how we are gonna create this toggle. And now I'm going to show you the gender dropdown. So as you can see here, I created the dropdowns folder. So because we're gonna have other dropdowns just for the sake of making our project organizable, and which is something very important to do. And over time, you will get some experience and your project is going to be organized more and more uh, as you get more experienced. So here we are going to use all these components from shadcn, the button, the command, the popover. If you did install this, so all you have to do, just go here into the shadcn website, type command and install. So they're given the CLI for each component, so the same for the popover. So the checkbox, also make sure to install the checkbox, the separator. So here we are, so we're gonna start, I'm gonna start explaining the code. So it's a little bit lengthy, so I'm gonna do my best to explain everything in here. And I think I'm gonna start from the GSX. So this is the GSX that we're gonna be using. So as you can see, it is a bit lengthy, as I said. So one thing that I do is sometimes I use the AI to be able to help me with this, or sometimes I think that what I did, I just went here and for this one, I used the AI to be able to actually generate all of this. But basically the popover, it's going to be used just to be able to actually show any object or any UI that we want. So that's why we're using the popover, and we're going to use the command if we go back to the command component in the shadcn. So we're going to use it to be able to show this kind of lists. So it's going to be the command components inside the popover component. So here we're having the popover trigger, and as you can see inside the popover content, we're having the command related tags. So here we're having the command list, and inside the command list, we're having the command empty. So if we go back to the project, so we're not going to use this in here. So here we're going to use the genders. So the genders area, it's going to have two elements, the value and the label. So we're going to use this area and we're going to map through it. And for each gender, we're going to use the command item, and inside the command item, so we're going to use the checkbox, and also we're going to use this div, which is going to have the gender that label, and here we're going to use this function to be able to actually calculate how many gender inside the patient's area. And finally, we're having at the bottom the button to be able to clear the filters. So if we go back in here, I'm going to start talking about this code and what it does. So we're having these states to be able to open and close the actual dropdown, and we're having the render gender number. So we're going to use this to be able to actually calculate the genders in the patient's array. So here we're going to use the patients from the use patient data store that I showed you. So we need to access to this. So because we're going to use this inside this function. So here we're going to take the gender as a parameter. And here we're going to actually calculate the male patients, and we're gonna see if the patient is not null. So that's why we're doing this turn operator. If it is not null, meaning that it is filled and loaded, so then we can be able to safely access this part and use the filter method. And we're gonna filter only the patients that have the gender as male, and we're gonna use the length to be able to know how many elements that we found. Otherwise, if this is still null, we're going to use so we need to return something, and we're going to just return the 0. And the same thing that we are going to do for the female. So we're not going to use the filter. So all you have to do is just uh, like calculate the total numbers of patient minus number male patient. It's going to give us the remaining elements which are the female patients. Otherwise, we're going to return 0 if if the patient is null. And here we're gonna, depending on the gender, we're gonna return the actual state. So if the gender is equal to male, we're gonna return the whatever the result that we're having inside the number male patient. Otherwise, we're gonna return this state. So this is the function that we're going to be using in here, so we can be able to actually get these numbers for the female and the male genders. And after that, I'm going to show you the function to be able to actually uh, select the elements and store them inside the selected gender state that I showed you inside the use gender store. And again, these we're going to use them to be able to filter with the Tanstack React table, which I'm going to show you later on inside the project. So that's why we're doing this. So here inside this function, so every time that we click on the checkbox or we click on this part or this whole part, we are going to actually call this toggle genders. So this is what we are doing, as you can see on the command item. So when the onSelect event listener is triggered, we're going to use the toggle genders function. And here we're going to pass inside of it the gender that value, which is coming from the genders array. So in this function, the first thing that we're going to do, as I commented in here, so we're gonna see if the actual gender is already included inside the selected genders by using the includes built-in JavaScript method, and we're gonna pass in the gender or the perimeter gender in the prompt. So if it is included, we are going to delete it by using the filter method. Otherwise, we're gonna add the gender like this, and we're gonna add it straight inside the set selected genders. And just to show you, like already logging this out, so if I open up the log, and so let's select the console, and if I click on here, as you can see, we're going to have the female, and if I click again on the female, it's going to be empty. So this is what I showed you here to be able to avoid the duplicates. So I think I explained everything inside this drop down, and this is how it is working. So the next drop down that I'm going to use is, or I'm going to create it, or I'm going to add into the code is for the diagnosis. So the next drop down that I added is the diagnosis. So when I click on it, as you can see, we're going to have these diagnoses. So we're going to stick with these, and also here at the right side. So we're going to show the numbers, the same thing that we did for the genders. So let's go back to the code. So we're going to start from here. And the first thing that I did, I created this store. So it's going to be the same thing that I did for the genders. So the only thing that is going to be changing is the name. So of course we can be able to actually store the elements that we selected in this list. So after that, we're going to go to the drop-down folder, and here we're having the diagnosis drop-down.tsx. So the logic is going to be pretty much the same. So the difference here, uh, we're going to use different data. So we're going to use the same structure, meaning that for each object, it's going to have the properties, value, and label. And here, as you can see, the list of health issues. Uh, that I showed you inside the drop-down list. So this to be able to open up or close the drop-down, and we are going to call these states from the use selected diagnosis store, so you can be able to select the elements whenever we click on the check. So here I'm gonna go from start from the GSX. So it is the same structure that I used for the gender drop-down. So here when I click on the command item, this is going to be triggered, and we're going to pass inside this function the update selected diagnosis. And also one thing that I didn't mention inside the checkbox, so the checked it's going to be dependent whether that the diagnosis, that value that is coming from this array is included inside the selected diagnosis. So if it is true, this is going to be marked as check. So if we go to this function, here we are going to create this state, which is going to have this line of code to make sure that if the diagnosis is already included inside the selected diagnosis. So if it is the case, we are going to delete the element. So we're going to take the selected diagnosis, which stores the previous states, and then we're going to use the filter method, and we are going to filter out the elements uh, that are different than diagnosis that we passed from the prompt. Otherwise, we're going to create a new one by using this syntax. So we're going to use the spread operator to not lose the previous elements inside the selected diagnosis that are inside the area, and then we're going to add the new one. So, and for this part, or for this function, we're going to use it to be able to calculate the actual diagnosis inside the patient's data. So we're going to use the same structure or the same logic that we did for the gender. So here we're going to use the switch method, and so the key is going to be the value, and depending on the case, we are going to return this part. So we're going to use the filter method, and we're gonna use the patient's array, and here we're gonna only filter the patients who has the diagnosis hypertension, and we're gonna use the link to be able to actually return how many items that we filtered by using this option. So we're gonna do the same thing for the other diagnosis. And if something goes wrong we're going to just return 0. And this function, of course, is going to use at the bottom in here inside the command item. And finally, we're having the clear filter. So when I click on it, it's going to set the selected diagnosis as an empty area. Like if I click on here, as you can see, all of these elements are going to be unselected automatically. And again, we're going to use this to work with the Tanstack React table. So when, for example, if you selected the female and diagnosis, and depending on whether the areas that you use to be able to store the element that you checked, so we're going to have a reset button at the bottom. So we're going to start working on this. So when we click on this, it's going to actually delete all the selected items just to enhance the user experience. So after we created the dropdown and the selection logic, so the next thing that I'm going to show you when I click on or I select the items that I want to filter by, for example, when I click on mail, as you can see, I'm going to have mail here just to know what is the actual item that I want to filter by. And also if I click on female, so we're going to have the female in the gender compartment. And if I click, for example, on diagnosis, as you can see, I'm gonna have the actual element inside diagnosis in another part. And also, if I do this, as you can see, I'm gonna have three selected items rather than having all the elements lined up like this, which is not gonna look that good. So that's why I did so. And if I click on the reset, as you can see, it's going to be everything's going to be cleared out, and also things are going to be unselected automatically because we're going to use the areas that I showed you where we are storing the items that we are selecting. And also if I click on the clear filter, as you can see, the same thing is going to happen from here just to enhance the user experience and to make things easier for the user to work with the application. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you what I did to be able to create this. So I created this filter area.jsx. So this is the component that has all the logic, as you can see. So I'm going to get into this. And of course, inside the page.jsx, we're going to import this functional component just to be able to render it inside the home page of our application. So let's go back to the app. So I'm going to start from the top, of course. So as you can see here, we are going to call all of these states from the stores that we created, where we store in the elements that we click in on. And I'm going to start from the JSX as always. So this is the main functional component of the filter area. And also they are sub-functional component that uh, are in the same file. So I don't want to create other files because I don't want to have a lot of files in the actual application, especially if a code that is not complicated. So I just stick with this and I just make sure that the functional components are in the same main or parent functional component. So let's start from the top. So as you can see here, we're having the two functional components, the filter gender and the filter diagnosis. So when I click, for example, on the gender, so this is the functional component inside the dashed borders. So this is for the filter genders. And if I select one of the diagnoses, so we're going to have this part that is external than this one. So this is the filter diagnosis functional component. And here, this actual statement or condition, so it's going to be dependent on the length of either the selected diagnosis or the selected genders. Then we're going to show the reset or reset button. And when we click on the button, we are going to call this function, which is going to update the selected diagnosis and the selected genders and make them empty. So let's go to the filter genders. So by the way, so the structure that we're going to use for the filter genders, it's going to be pretty much the same of the filter diagnosis because we're going to have a slight difference because here we have the actual case. If we select more than three elements, we're going to have the three selected tag. So let's go back to the functional component. The first thing that we did here, we access the selected genders and inside the JSX. So we are going to check if the length is more than 0. So if it is, meaning that there is an item inside the selected gender, then we are going to return this whole GSX, which is this one. So we're having the gender and the badge or the tag that we selected. So here, as you can see, we're having the span that is showing the gender and the separator. And then we're going to use the selected genders array. We're going to use a map function to be able to map through each element. And we're going to render each element inside the badge tag. So, and also if you need to make sure that the badge tag is already installed. So again, all you have to do, just go to the shadcn UI, type in badge and just install the component by pasting this into your terminal and hitting enter. So this is for the filter genders. And if we go to the filter diagnosis, so it is pretty much the same thing in here. So the same structure that we used for the actual array, but it's going to be here. We are going to take the actual tags that we are showing. We are going to take them inside another functional component, which is I called the show less than two items. So here we're going to do this condition only if the elements has less or equal than 0, then we are going to do the same thing, meaning that we're going to map through each element inside the array, and then we're going to use the batch tag to render each element. So if it is not the case, meaning that if there is more than three selected items, we're going to just return this batch functional tag that is showing the three selected phrase or text. So, and this is how we created this part inside or underneath this part, which is showing these the filtered elements that the user has clicked on. So next, I'm going to show you the logic that I use to be able to switch between the components if we um, choose a different view, like when I click on the grid. As you can see here, we're going to have another component, so it's just returning a simple text. And when I click on the list icon, I'm going to have the patient table. So I'm going to show you very quickly the fundamental logic that I use before we start adding stuff like the table for the patient table component or the patient or the cards for the patient card area component. So here, as you can see, I created two folders because we're going to be adding more files inside the patient table that is related to the Tanstack table. So I created that inside one folder. And for the patient's card area, also we're going to be adding another component for this particular component. So that's why I created it inside another folder just for to make sure that everything is organized. So the patient card area, it's going to just return the simple div and same thing for the patient table.tsx. So after creating these two components, so this is the simple logic that we're going to be using. So the first thing that I did, so I accessed the current view from the use patient view store that I showed you inside the hooks folder, how we created it. And then we are going to create this function. It's called the render current view functional component. So depending on the current view state, so if it is list, so we're gonna return the patient table component. Otherwise, we're going to return the patient card component, and we're going to use this functional component, and we're going to put it inside or underneath the filter area. So wherever that is returned, depending on the current state, it's going to be shown in the main in the JSX of the main page. So this is the logic that I used. So and as so things are going to be pretty complex when we start adding more stuff to these components. So after we created our toggle logic, as you can see, um, the next thing that I added, which is this table. So we took the data coming from the static data that were added inside our project, and we transformed it like this by using the Tanstack React table package. So I'm going to show you all the steps how to be able to create this in the first step. So first, I want to just mention this is where the first place to start from is this data table post inside the shadcn website. So they're providing a really in-depth step-by-step how to be able to install the Jamstack React table. So they are giving kind of the basic stuff to start with, but there are some advanced features that we're going to be adding inside this table, and it took me quite a while to be able to figure that out because the documentation in their official website is not that in depth, and it's pretty complicated for developers, especially beginner like me. So first we need to install these elements. So we're going to install this table, and we need to install the table component from shadcn and also the Jamstack React table. So again, it's very easy. All you have to do just copy these lines and paste them into your terminal. Open up your terminal and paste them in here to be able to install all of these inside your project. So the next thing, so I'm gonna start like explaining from here to not get you overwhelmed. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start from the data table.tsx. So the data table, it's the structure, it's the generic structure of the table. So this one, I just took it from this part. I just copied this and pasted it in here, but I did some minor changes. So here, as you can see, if we go back to this website, we're having the data, but here we're not having the data, we're having the table. So the reason why we're having the table because we're going to use the React table or the use React table outside this component, not inside of it. So that's why we're having inside this prompt the table. So if we go to the page.tsx in here and or let me go to the patient table, sorry. So inside this patient table, as you can see, we're having the data table component that I just showed you. So this is this is its parent component. So as you can see, we're having the table inside in the parent component, and we're going to pass it down inside the data table. So that's why we're having in this component in the prompt the table, which is going to be this type. So this React table is from Tanstack. So as you can see, so we're going to use it from here. So we just changed the name as React table because it's going to be mixed with the table component from shadcn. So that's why we did so. And for the other, and another thing that I added is the extends patient, meaning that these types are generic types from Tanstack. So to be able to narrow down our structure, because we want to just work with the properties coming from the patient's interface, so that's why we use the extends patient. So that's a utility type from Typescript. And basically for the other code, it's going to remain the same. The only thing that I added is the poppins utility class to be able to apply the poppins font. And the next thing that I'm going to show you is the patient columns. So here, if we go back to this documentation, also they're providing, they're telling us that we need to create the columns.tsx. So it's going to be fairly different than this one because this is a basic one just to let you know how this works. So here, as you can see, so this is the array. So it's a pretty lengthy array, as you can see, because we're having, if we go back to the table, we're having one, two, three, one, because this is also is a column. We're going to add a drop down to be able to modify or delete the patient. So we're having one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight columns. So for each object, refer to a column. So this is for the first column. So all of this is a column. The ID is going to be select and the header. So the header, which is the header of the column, we're going to return a GSX. And this is the GSX that we're going to be returning, which is a checkbox. And this checkbox, it's going, which is this part, it's going to select all the elements in here. So that's why we're using for the on checked change when we click on the checkbox. So it's going to trigger this to be able to select all the elements or all the check all the patient rows. And for the cell, so that's refer to each cell. So to be able to render each checkbox in each cell, we're gonna use again this checkbox and we're gonna access to the row which reference to this whole part or this whole cell. And we're gonna use the checked link to if the row that gets is selected function, which is a built-in function provided by shadcn. So the next header is going to be the first name, as you can see. So the header, it's going, so this is what it's going to be shown inside the header. Like just to show you, if I add two X's, as you can see, they're going to be added inside the header. And the access key is going to be linked to the property that we used inside the interface. Like for the patients, so we need to use the same key with the same cases inside the column inside the columns array. So for each cell, as you can see, as you can see, we're having some icons, and also we need also to render the names. To be able to do so, so we're going to create this function which is going to return a GSX element. So first we're going to access to the first name by using the row that original that first name, and also we're going to access the gender. So the reason for this because we want to show either the man icon or the female icon based on the gender that we accessed from the row that original that gender. So here we're going to store the icon that we want, and we're going to use it inside this div. And for the span, so here we're going to just show the first name that we got from this variable. So this is for the last name. This is for the diagnosis. Here we're going to just return the batches. So as you can see, we're going to use the batch functional or tag from shadcn to be able to show them like this. So the only thing that I think I need to get rid from the shadow, I think that's not looking that good. So if I do so, I think right now it is, so it's just a tiny detail. And this is for the gender header. This is for the appointment date, the last visit, and finally here the action, which we're going to use for the drop down later on inside the project. And if we go to the patient table, we need to render or to use these two elements that I showed you. So here we're having the functional component patient table, which is going to accept the patient data, which is going to come from its parent component, which is the page.tsx. So this is how we are using the patient table, and we're going to pass inside of it the patient's area that is accessed from the use patient data store. So here, so I showed you this just to be able to understand how this is working and why we did use the prompts like this. So here, as you can see, we're going to use the use React table hook. So this use, if we go back to their website, so the use React hook is this one inside this functional component, but we took it outside and we put it inside its parent component. So here for the data, it's going to be the patients. Otherwise, the fallback, it's going to be an array, an empty array. The columns, it's going to be the one that is coming from this file. And all of these are just basic functions that are coming from the Tanstack React table. So these are gonna, we're gonna need them when we start working with the filtering, the pagination, and the sorting. So here, another thing that I didn't show you is if I reload the page, we're going to have this skeleton waiting for the data to be loaded, kind of, because we're just simulating this. So if the patient is null, we're going to show this component, which is the skeleton table. So this is how I created the skeleton, as you can see. So I'm going to go through it very quickly. So we're having the table. So these are just native HTML tags, and we are going to create this array map through all of these elements. So we're going to use the skeleton functional component or component from shadcn. And here we are going to show the body. So this is how we're going to do it by using the array built-in function from JavaScript. So, and after that, when the patient is filled, then we're going to access or call the data table that I showed you. And of course, we're going to pass inside of it the columns and the table. So this is basically how we created the table. So this is just, we are just scratching the surface, and then we're going to be adding a lot of features inside the table. But the next element that I want to be adding is the patient cards for each patient, and this is what I'm going to do. Then I'll be back to explain everything that I did. So after we created the patient table, the next element is the cards. So as you can see, when I click on this view, as you can see, we can be able to see the cards based on the same data, but now the view is going to be different. So this is what I stick with as a design. So it's pretty simple design, showing all the necessary information for each patient. So let's go back to the VS Code to show you how I created this. And I'm going to start from the page.tsx. So as you can see, we're having the patient card area that is going to accept, as we did for this component, the patient's array. So here, if we go to the folder, as you can see, I added the patient card as well. So I'm going to get into this. But first, let's start talking about the patient card area.tsx. So as you can see, I added this simple code to be able to actually render all the cards. So as I showed you in the print component, this functional component will accept the patient's array as a parameter of, and here we are going to do something different. So here, because I've already created the project and I know the ins and the outs, so this is going to be very like why we did use this, why we did add the patient index in this. So we took the patient's array from the parent component, and since the use state can use a function inside the use state, so what we did, we want to add the patient index inside the patient, and we're gonna return where for each element for each patient, we're gonna add it inside of it, the patient index, and the global array updated array is gonna be stored in here. So the reason why I did so, because later on when we're gonna start working with the selection. So we're going to use a row selection array. And what I want is, and what what I had, what I what what I did push me to really do this because the selection that I'm doing in here need to be in synced with this card because I need to work with the functionalities from Tanstack and I need to sync them with the cards, which was the biggest challenge for me in this project. So when I, for example, just to show you when I select this, so this is going to be of index 2. And so later on, we're going to be creating a state to be able to store the indexes, and this index need to be synced with the cards inside this functional component. So this is why I added the patient index. So you will get the picture, the full picture when we get into this part. So first we're going to return loading, just a simple p tag, because first this always it's going to be the table first. So there is no need to add the skeleton and just to make the code bigger. And here we're going to return the GSX to be able to return the patient cards. So here, as you can see, inside this div, we're going to use the grid display with the four columns, a little bit of margin at the top, at the bottom, a bit of gap between each card. And we're going to use the patient or the updated patients, which is this state, and we're going to map to each element, and then we're going to call the patient card, which will accept the single patient, which is each object that is coming from this array. So if we go to the patient card, as you can see in the prompt, we're going to accept the single patient of top updated patient. So that's why we exported it like this. And for the typing, I didn't talk about this. So we are going to add the patient index. So it's going to be an extension of the patient type that we created to be able to structure our array. So if we go back to the patient card.tsx, here we're going to create this function to be able to actually render the icons, either female or male. So the same principle I showed you inside the patient columns, which is going to accept the gender of type female or male, because we're going to use this function inside the GSX. And this is the GSX of the each card. So we're having this part, so this part is going to show the gender, the first name and the last name, and also the diagnosis. And also I want to show you the render gender as you can see. So here we're going to show the icon inside this div, and here we're going to call this function to be able to actually render the specific icon depending on the gender. So that's why we added inside this function rather than doing it inside the JSX just to make the code cleaner. And for these parts, we're doing this for the uh, appoint date and the last visit. So also another thing that I need to do is the poppins font. I think that is not applied. The font that is applied is the default one provided by shadcn. So now as you can see, it looks much better with the poppins font. So this is basically how we can be able to create the table and the cards. So as you can see, there is a lot of work, but there is a ton of work ahead of us to be able to make these working with the feature that I showed you. But the biggest challenge that was for me is to be able to sync whatever I'm doing inside the patient list with the cards in here. So after we created the table, the next item that I added is the pagination area, as you can see. And also we're having the selection component, and also we're having this button to be able to go from one page to another. So now they're not working, but I want to just show you how to be able to plug this with the table. So let's go back to our code. And so the first thing that I'm going to show you, or I'm going to start from the patient table component. And in here, as you can see, I added this component called the pagination area. So if we go to the pagination area, it is coming from this file. So I added two files, the pagination area and the pagination selection. So this is the code that is responsible for this whole part, as you can see. So the first thing that we're having in here, so this is the JSX. So we're having the parents div with the utility classes, and also we are using the theme from the use theme hook from the next themes package that we installed to be able to handle the dark and the light mode, so you can be able to actually switch or change the background color. So if I go back to my application and if I switch to the dark mode, as you can see, so the colors are going to be changing. So because of this background color constant, and this we're going to be adding it inside the class name with the those utility classes. And at the bottom, we're having the pagination selection, which is this component in here. And here we're having for the remaining GSX, so this div is going to render all the buttons that we're having at the right side. So we're having four buttons. So this is what we're having. So this is for the first button. So we're going to use this to be able to go right to the first page. This is for the next button to be able to go to the next or the previous page. And finally, we're having the remaining buttons. So this is for the next page, and this is for the last page. And as you can see, I just commented this because I took this from Tanstack. So when we are gonna use the table instance from the parent component, and we're gonna be adding inside the prompt. So I don't have to rewrite the code. All I have to do is to uncomment this, and you are right to go, and the component is ready to work. And the next component that I'm gonna access to is the pagination selection. So the pagination selection is going to use the select component from shadcn to be able to show all of these numbers. So we're going to use this to be able to show how many rows that we want to show inside each page. So this is the component, as you can see. So it's very simple component. So most of the code, I took it from shadcn. I just updated the elements needed to be able to have the result that I showed you. So inside the select, so all of these components are coming from the select UI component from shadcn. So this is for the trigger element. And inside the select content, we're going to use this array and we're going to map through it. And for each element, we're going to use the select item to be able to show each element like this when the select is opened up. So after we start working on the table, so there are going to be minor changes, so you can be able to save the selection whenever we click on the how many pages or how many rows that we want inside each page. And finally, I want to show you one last thing inside the data table. So here I just fixed the problem of the color when I switch to dark mode, as you can see, because previously even the dark mode is on, we still having the white colors. So to be able to change this, first I created this function. I called it dark color switcher. So first we're going to import or use the use theme hook again to access the theme to know which theme that we are in. So based on this, we're going to do our operation in this function. So if the theme is light, so we're going to check if the index, so the index it's going to be an argument that we're going to use it right inside the class name. So if it is because we want to have the colors, as you can see, so if I turn the light mode, so as you can see, we're having the first is white and the second one is slightly gray. So to be able to do this, we're going to use the index and we're going to see if the index is even or odd. So if it is odd, we're going to use those utility classes, meaning the background is going to be white and also the hover background color, it's going to be gray. So when I hover over it, as you can see, we're having the hovering color as gray. Otherwise, it's going to be this gray color. And if the theme is dark, we're going to use the background transparent. So if I turn the dark mode on, as you can see, so the same color that we're using is in the body color. So because we use the background as transparent. And finally, we're going to use the function as I showed you to be able to actually apply the returned value inside the class name. And this is how we're going to use this function. So this is basically how we created our full table. So now we finished creating the full UI of our component. So the next thing that I'm going to start working on is making this table functionable. So the next feature that I added is the sorting function. So as you can see in our table, we're having these icons and when I click on one of these headers, so as you can see, our table is going to be sorted by diagnosis. So I can be able, if I click on it again, it's going to be sorted descendantly. So the same thing if I do, when I click again on the column, it's going to be sorted ascendantly. And if I click on other another column, so of course this is going to be disabled and the sorting is going to be applied for the column that I clicked on. And not only this, so we have to make it synchronous with the cars that we're using in here. So as you can see here, because right now the sorting is functioning, so we're gonna have the element that we are sorting by. So if I sort by diagnosis, again, if I come back in here, all the elements are sorted the same way that we sorted our table because these two components are separate. So we're going to use the functionality from Tanstack and then we're going to apply it for the cars that we created, and I'm going to show you how to be able to create this. So let's go back to the VS Code. So the first thing that I'm going to start with before I start showing you the actual logic, so we're going to start from the patient's column. So first we need to add some code uh, to make the logic when I click on the headers is sortable. So if I go uh, at the top of the columns area, as you can see inside the header, so instead of using just a simple text that we did for the header, right now we're using arrow function. So the column, so it's an instance of a column that we're gonna use, and we're gonna pass inside the sortable header, which is a custom component that we created because we're gonna reuse it over and over again for all the headers. So instead of just uh, duplicating the code, why not creating one code in one component and reuse it? So the only thing that is going to be changing is the label. So I'm going to show you the logic that I used for the sortable header. So the sortable header is going to accept the colon as a parameter and the label. So the colon, we are going to use the interface colon from React, from Tanstack React, as you can see. So it is imported from the package. And for the generic values, we're going to use the patient for the data and endnode for the value, and the label is going to be string. So the first thing that we're gonna do, we're gonna see if the column is sorted. So we're gonna use this built-in function from the package called get is sorted, and we are going to save whatever results inside the is sorted. So it is accepting two types, the false or sort direction. So the sort direction is coming from the package as well. So depending on the is sorted value, so first we need to actually choose the icon that we want depending on the state of the is sorted. So if it is sorted as a sentence, we're going to use this icon. So when I click, for example, on a sentence, so we're going to use the arrow up icon, which is this icon. Otherwise, so we are going to see if it is descended. So if it is descended, we're going to use the arrow down. So when I click on this, so it's going to be ascendant. And otherwise, if it is not sorted at all, for example, if I click on another column, so we're going to use the up and down arrow icon. So this is what we're having for the last condition, meaning that the is sorting for the column that we clicked on is not sorted at all. Otherwise, we're going to use this icon. And finally, we are going to return this button. So actually, what's in here, so it is a button. So this is why we're using the return function to return this JSX. So to be able to actually hide the borders and the colors of the button, we're going to use the ghost as a variant. And here we're going to see to be able to actually see which column that is sorted. So we need to differentiate it with a color. So that's why we use the string operator. So depending on if it is sorted, we're going to use the text primary, which is the primary color from shadcn. And then when I click on it, so we're going to trigger this function or this line. So all of these functions are from Tanstack React table package. And finally, we are going to return the label that is coming from the label prompt. So this, as you can see, it is a reusable functional component. And if I go all the way down, so all the columns, sorry. So as you can see, we're going to use for the first name, and for the last name, we're going to use the same functional component. So the only thing that is going to be changing is the last name label, but also the instance of the column, because the instance that is coming from this object is going to be different from the header, as long as it is uh, uh, it is uh, it is accepting the actual type that we provided for the column prompt. So we're going to do it for the remaining object, as you can see, for the diagnosis, for the gender, for the appointment date, and for the last visit. For the last objects, we're not going to do it because we're going to just use this to be able to show a drop down. So after we modified our title, our tape, our header. So the next thing that I'm going to show you, I'm gonna go to the uh, patient table. So inside the patient table, or I'm gonna go first. So let's start from the patient table. So for the from the for the first for this functional component, as you can see, I added these two elements. So I added the get sorted row model. So also I added this, and the on sorting change the set sorting. So, and also I added this state, which is the sorting. So it can be able to actually save the state whenever we sort the column that we want. And these two elements are going to come from the parent component. So that's why we added them in the prompt of the patient table. So this is going to be linked to this sorting state, and the set sorting is going to be linked to the on sorting change. So why we did this? Because we're going to use the same whatever that we're having inside this array. So just to understand what I'm talking about, so if I click on this, as you can see, we're going to have this array. So this is the sorting array, and we're going to store this object, the ID, which is the ID of the column that we clicked on, whether that it is descendant or uh, true or false. When I click on this, as you can see, if I open this up, the descendant is going to be false. So we're going to store this inside the sorting, which is coming from the parent component. And if I go to the page.tsx. So this is the prop, and we're gonna actually save the state inside the sorting state that is in the parent component. And then we're gonna use the sorting, and we're gonna pass it down again to the patient card area. So that's how we are going to make the sorting synchronized between the table and the cards that we used to be able to show the patients in a form of card. So if I go to the patient card table, area, sorry. So first we're going to accept this object, the sort and the set sorting. So we put them inside one object, as you can see. And also we use the sorting prop that I didn't mention. So we created the sorting prop as a interface. So this is the types of each element because we're going to reuse it inside, use it twice inside this component and this component. So that's why I put it in the parent component to avoid duplicating the same code. And then we're going to use, as I said, the sorting to be able to make the sorting. So for this component, so we're going to make the sorting manually. So thanks to AI, I've been able to create this. To be honest with you, I didn't create this by myself. So as you can see, it's a pretty complicated code. So I used AI to be able to really manage this for me and create the sorting, and the sorting is working. So again, if I go all the way up, what we're going to do, we're going to call this function that I showed you, and then we're going to use the updated patients because this function accept the patients as an area with the update patient interface that we used because we added the sorting, we added the index. So that's why we used the update patient interface, as you can see. Um, so we added this type, and then we're gonna use this. So this the sorting array, that object that I showed you in the console log. Otherwise, if something happens normally, so we're gonna use this fallback. And finally, inside the GSX, we're gonna use the sorted patients, and instead of using the updated patients to be able to actually show the cards based on whatever returned inside the sorted patients. And also, we're gonna show the render sorting tag, which is uh, if I go to the patient card area, so we're gonna show this part. So this part, just for best practices and clean code. So I used it inside this render sorting tag, as this is the code of it. And based on this condition, if the sorting that links is more than 0, then we're gonna be able to show this functional component. And when I click on the reset, as you can see, the sorting is gone, and the same for the table because we are using the sorting state to be able the same state to be able to actually make the sorting for the table and also for the cards area. So when I click on the button, the set sorting, it's going to be an empty array, which is coming from this prompt that we used from the parent component. So this is basically how we can be able to create this. So it is there is a lot of work to create this, but as you can see, it is working perfectly. So after we added the sorting for the table and the patient cards, the next thing that I added is the search. So if I type in something in here, as you can see, we're going to get the result depending on the query that we typed in. And also, if I go to the card area, as you can see, we're going to have the same results. So uh, here, as you can see, everything is synchronized. So if I search for Bob, so we're going to have the Bob patient, and also we're going to have it right into the table. And if we don't have anything, as you can see, we're going to have this generic error message, and also uh, the same thing in the table, nothing is going to be found. So when I click on this icon, as you can see, we're going to get our data back, the same for the table and the same for the cards. And also another thing that I want to show you while we are sorting the elements, so the sorting is not going to be it's not going to be lost. As you can see, even though that I'm searching, the sorting is still working for both table and the card, as you can see. So let's go back to the VS Code. So we are going to use a very advanced feature from Tanstack table, which is the filtering. And I know filtering it's might be a little bit complex because in their docs they're not really explaining easily how it works. So it took me quite some time to be able to figure that out. So we're going to start from the data table.tsx. So at the top here, or let me go to the patient table.tsx where we're using the use React table. So here, as you can see, we added this interface called the name search filter inside the filter functions interface. So it is an advanced feature in TypeScript. So we're gonna add this filter manually to the interface. So because we're gonna use it inside the patient columns, as I'm going to show you. So after we created this, the next thing that we're going to do, we need to create a function that Tanstack is going to be using to be able to make the filtering happening. So as you can see, I have the filters folder, and inside of it, we're having this file. So this is the function that we're going to be using to be able to make the filter. So it's going to accept these three arguments. So these arguments are going to be kind of the default arguments that the task stack uses. So always make sure to add them like this in these positions. So first, what we're going to do, we are going to extract the first name and the last name. So we're going to use the row that get value, and we're going to use the key that we used inside the columns. So the same thing for the last name, and these are just fallback elements. So if something goes wrong, it's going to be an empty string. And then the query, we're going to get it from the filter value, and we're going to use the true lowercase JavaScript function to be able to lowercase the element that we are typing. So after this, we're going to return these two elements at the same time, whether we're going to return this or we're going to return this. So this is going to return this type. So this is the actual function. So this is the structure of the function that we created so that Tasstack can use to be able to filter whatever that we are querying. So if we go back to the patient table, so we're going to use this function and we're going to add it inside the filter functions object and the use React table, and we're going to use the function that we created in this file. So instead of using this function right inside of this file and to make things organized, so that's why we added it in its own file, because we're going to add other filters like the genders and diagnoses. So again, to be able to use this function, so we need to import it, as you can see from the file that I showed you, which is this one. So after that, we're going to go to the patient colon.tsx, and at the bottom, inside the first name and the last name, we're going to use the filter function. So we're going to choose the function interface that we created in here. So this is what we're going to use, and automatically the task stack React table through the use React table hook, it's going to do its thing to be able to make this function working, because we added in the patient columns these references, so to speak, to be able to actually go to the function that we created and we added inside the hook. So after that, what we're going to do, we are going to actually access to the query from the use search query store. So every time that we type in here, this it's going to be updated. So that's why we used it inside the store that we used, and we use Zustand for the state management, so you can be able to make sure that this query can be shared across all the components. So because these two components, the components in here, that we're using for the table and for the cards are going to be very different. So to be able to access to the same query, so that's why we use Zustand and we put it inside the use search query store. So we're going to access to the query, and here inside the use effect, so we're going to put the query as an array dependency. So meaning that every time that the query changes, this code is going to be executed. And also we added another states, the column filter and the set column filters with this column filter state, which is an interface or a type from Tanstack. So if I click on it, as you can see, it is coming from the actual package. So after that, we're going to add the column filters inside the state object, and also we're going to add the set column filters inside the on column filters change. So as you might notice, it's pretty complex process to be able to create, and the Tanstack uses heavily TypeScript, which makes things even more complex. But it is a great way to learn how things work under the hood. So after this, what we're going to do whenever the query changes, we're going to create this new filters array with the type column filters state. And just to show you the uh, what is inside the new filters. So I'm gonna log this out. So let me open up the log, the console log, and every time that I'm typing, so something went wrong. So every time that I'm typing in here, so so I think that I didn't save. So sorry, I need to put this in here, or yeah, I need to put this under this if statement so you can be able to see what's inside the array. So here we go. So here we're having the two elements, the object, the first name and the last name. So this is what's inside the new filters. So after that, we are going to update the set columns with the new filters. So when the state is happening, so it's going to trigger the actual filtering because we linked the column filters with the state object, which is the column filters, and the Tanstack is going to do the rest for us. So this is basically how we can be able to create our function, our filtering, and also we need to use the get filtered row model. So this is the core function that's going to do the whole filtering process. So it is a built-in function, so we don't have to create our filter by ourselves. So this is basically how we can be able to create the filtering for the search. So we're going to use pretty much the same process for the diagnosis and the genders once we start working on that. So next, we're going to go to the patient card just to make sure that everything is synchronized. So as I showed you, when I type in here, the same results we're going to have inside the patient card. So basically what we're going to do in here, we need to access to the query the same thing that we did for the table area. As you can see, we're going to access it from the store. And then after this function, we're going to use the filter function, and we're going to use because we're going to filter by the first name and the last name. So inside this filter, we're going to actually use the patient that first name, and we're going to lower the case, and we're going to make sure that the query that to lowercase, meaning that the query is lowered case, make sure that it is included, and the same for the last name, and we're going to return both results. And so this is the first thing. And also the second thing at the bottom in the GSX. So we're going to return the generic error message that I showed you. And this is the code. So we're going to use a turn operator. So we're going to make sure that the sorted patients that length is equal to 0 and the query is more than 0. Then we're going to show this simple div with this exclamation icon and the span message. Otherwise, we're gonna just show the sorted elements. So This is basically how we can be able to create our filtering. As you can see, it has been a lot of work to do, but everything is working. So the next thing that we are gonna add is the genders and diagnosis.